So we pulled off to the side of the road and we got out of the car and we're standing there and we're watching this thing just hover. And it's not making any sound at all. Nothing. It's just completely silent.
Mm-hmm.
A guy pulls up behind us, gets out of the car, and he says, "What the heck is that?" And my dad said, "I don't know." And then it went like that at this fantastic speed. Like it went directly away from us, but at a speed that was like incalculable. And we just stood there looking up into the night sky thinking, is it going to come back? Is it some kind of experimental jet? I mean, I had never in my life seen anything like it, and neither had he. So we get back in the car, we start driving again, and we're silent.
Yep.
And then I said to him, "So should we call somebody? Should we like call the cops or something?" And he said, "And tell them what? We saw a flying saucer and it flew away." He said, "They're going to think we're nuts."
Yeah.
So we didn't tell anybody until the next day. We went home after the end of the shift and we told my mom. She said, "Oh, come on." And my dad said, "I am telling you, we saw a UFO." And I've been thinking, I was 17 years old and I'm 60 now. And I still think about it all the time.
Yeah. So it affects everyone differently. I've talked to people that say, "Oh yeah, that happened," and no, crazy sighting too, and like, "Oh yeah, that happened," and what's for dinner?
Yeah, right.
But other
people, they shrug their shoulders like, "Oh, I don't know what it is."
Yeah, and that's why I'm here. And I have to tell you, I had my sighting in California, and it was something that baffled me. If I had a camera, I might have not thought to take a picture. And I was in a hot tub, and and there was no bubbles, and there was no sound, and that's what freaked me out the most. This thing was actually moving at a steady pace, and there was absolutely no sound, I just couldn't understand why there was no sound. Now I have to, and I called the cops, and I got ridiculed.
See, exactly,
Yep.
Exactly. Jimmy Carter, when he was governor of Georgia, he saw one, and he called the cops, and he filed a report saying that it hovered in the air, it was buzzing, and they ridiculed him. And then they released the report during the 1976 presidential campaign just as a way to mock him and make him sound like he was crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think they may have explained what that is. There was some type of failed launch or something, but it's possible. It's possible. And I don't, but I think even the grandson agreed to it. There was something I watched, but still there's so many more examples of people that have seen these things. And the ridicule factor is a lot less today than it was. I'm sure you're aware of when the Pentagon, then 2017, when the article came out in the New York Times, with the videos and all that kind of changed the ridicule factor way down.
A lot of people were convinced on the one hand or silenced on the other. Before we started the show too, you and I were talking about something else. When I was a kid, I had a lot of family here in the Washington area. And so when I was a kid, we used to come down to Washington for summer vacations and stay with our relatives. Well, my dad's cousin, who was my godfather, owned a very prominent steakhouse in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. And he would get, senators and congressmen and bankers and politicians, from the city. And it was sort of a crossroads for movers and shakers in Washington. And his son, who worked there as a manager of the restaurant, had a friend who was there one day when I was there, and he happened to be an F-14 pilot. So I'm thinking this is 1977 or 78, and he told us this story. He just volunteered this story that he was based at Langley Air Force Base in Norfolk, Virginia. And he said all of the pilots had seen these phenomena, whatever they were. In fact, he had seen one. He followed it for a while, and it went down into the water. It stayed down there for a while, and then it came back up. And he said he was so rattled that when he landed and reported it to his superiors and some of the other pilots have said, "Oh, I've seen that. I've seen where they go down into the water and come back up." And he said he filed his flight report, and nobody ever bothered to, ask him follow-up questions to question, was that really what you saw, or could it have been something else? They just accepted it. Like, oh yeah, everybody sees those. They go down to the water, they come up. And I remember he said that it was almost like the thing was drinking. It went down into the water on purpose and stayed down there and then came back up.
Did you describe a shape of any kind? Do you remember?
He said that was a cylinder, like like a cigar is what he said.
There's a lot of people describing cigar shape, UFOs, and but that's the first one I've heard of a cigar shape in the water. But in and out of the water, USO, UFO, USO, whatever you want to call that one. But fascinating.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I don't know if you happened to see on Netflix. It was like Unsolved Mysteries, or it was one of these shows that Netflix just posted in the last year, and there was a very detailed episode about these sightings over Lake Michigan.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Because almost all of the witnesses were employees of the National Weather Service, and not only did they see them in the sky, but they followed them on the radar.
That's
and
right.
Those went down into the water. What do you make of that?
I think there's really something to that, and that the main person in that episode was on my show, and like a year before he told me that he was, they had already filmed that episode for Netflix, but anyway, he has a total science mind, and was absolutely baffled by what he was seeing there. So yeah, there was really something to that. And the same thing, Lake Michigan, another big body of water.
And interestingly, they said that where the lake had frozen, they avoided that part. They went over the water that hadn't frozen and then down into the water.
Yeah.
Which was interesting too.
That is that night was a great event that you really don't hear a lot about. Matter of fact, until you just brought it up, I basically haven't thought about that one for quite a while.
I was fascinated because it lasted for hours. And it wasn't just, one guy who may have been too tired while he was, on the job in the middle of the night. It was like a dozen different people, and they all watched it unfold on the radar as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a real good one. I have reached out to, and I can't think of his name right off the bat. I've reached out to him again after that aired. I'd like to talk to him again about that. I think he received a lot of flack for that. I do believe he did.
In fact, he quit his job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Which is really sad. There's a lot of these situations you hear about, things like that. There was a situation called JAL. I can't think of the name. It was a Japanese airline cargo back. I'm going to get the whole thing. I haven't looked into that for quite a while. But basically, the pilot kept seeing this large thing the size of like a battleship up in the sky, like the shape of a walnut. It was following them, and it was on radar, and they saw it on ground radar. He ended up getting a desk job after that. But eventually enough people, pulled for him and got him back to flying again. But, you can't, it's hard when you report these things with someone like him.
It is. It's hard when you report them.
Yeah. There's so many things I'd like to talk to you about, but also I do want to just touch on the whistleblowing part that you did at some point here in the conversation. Again, that the full interview that we did about that is going to be linked at the very end of the show, and down, I can put it also in the show notes as well. But I want to talk a little bit about drones, because it's kind of still such a mystery. I mean, I'm still kind of baffled by it, and I don't really know what I think about the explanations I keep hearing out there, and wondered what you thought about that.
At first I was well, at first I just assumed it was a Defense Department exercise of some sort. And I have a friend who happens to be a New Jersey state trooper. He said that they were working under the impression that there was a DOE or DOD cargo that went missing, that perhaps it was nuclear, perhaps it was maybe a weapon of some sort or a missile, and the convoy, lost the 18-wheeler. I don't know. He said that's what he thought it was. That's what he had been told it was. But then there was a segment on 60 Minutes just a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago maybe, where they interviewed these the current and the former commanding generals from I think it was Langley, actually. Langley Air Force Base.
Right, yes.
And they said that, people think we can just shoot these things down, but they're so small that you can't use a fighter jet to shoot something that is so small and is guided by hand. So their conclusions were that they were hostile, likely Chinese. There happened to be a Chinese ship off the coast of New Jersey, at least for a little while these things were flying around. And he said, we have to come up with a better system to protect ourselves. We can protect ourselves against incoming ICBMs, for example.
Yeah.
But we can't protect ourselves against drones.
Right. And the thing of it is that it's worldwide too. That's another real puzzle.
Yeah.
And these things are happening like every year around the same time. It was happening as well over the last several years. There was an event in Colorado a few years ago that was baffling to everyone out there. I don't know if you heard about that, but
No.
But then there's these really large size drones, and they're going for for extended amounts of time.
Yes.
So it's just it's
Yeah,
still
that's
it's
right.